Hello, Rowan here. Today we are going to finish talking about my deck collection. We're going to go through my tarot decks today. So the first one that I would like to show off is out of print, and I keep it in this little bag. It was originally from US Games. You can find this deck currently going for approximately $80 on YouTube or on eBay, or at least the last I checked. It might not be current, but the last I checked. I tie these really well so they're hard, so that they don't like fall open, but that makes them very difficult to get into. In the bag, I keep the little white book that it comes with, which is not particularly good. This deck does come with 2 extra art cards. I have them as bookmarks right now, so they are not with the deck. Let's set that down. This is the Art Nouveau Tarot. I don't think I said that. This was a gift from my mother. It was the first tarot deck that is currently in my collection that I ever received. I did buy myself one before this, but I did not like it very much. It did not resonate with me. It was a poor choice for first deck. If I were to go back to it now, I probably wouldn't have as many problems with it, but I did give it away to somebody who was a more experienced reader than me so that they could appreciate it. But this deck is really beautiful, but really weird. I love it so much. I don't read with it often because it's very heterocentric. It is very white. It is very skinny. It is very Wiccan. It does change the wand and sword suits around so that swords are fire and wands are air. As you can see, the Page of Swords has salamanders behind him. The salamander is associated with the suit of fire because traditionally salamanders lived in the dried logs that would be used as wood kindling. They would make homes in wood piles, and then when the wood would be taken to be burned, when the fire was lit, salamanders would run out of the fire. And so they like sort of got this this mythos about them that they were born from fire, so they're very spiritually and alchemically connected to fire, and in fact, they're in some myths, or rather folk tales, there is a mythical salamander that has 6 legs instead of just 4. But this deck means a lot to me sentimentally. I have thought about trimming it, but I don't think I ever would. I'm going to keep the borders on because even though I don't like them at all, I would hate to mess up this deck. It was my mother's when she was in college in the late 80s and early 90s, and it is mine now. So it was like my first gifted deck. It means a lot to me. I use it for romantic readings and to check in on relationships. You don't necessarily have to use it for romance. You can use it for just like any sort of relationship reading, but that's about all that it's good for. It's really difficult to read that deck in any other way for me personally. The next deck that I got after that one that I actually was able to learn tarot on because it had a good guidebook is the Bianco Nero, which I keep in this black bag that's covered in cat fur. This is the Bianco Nero. This deck also has 2 additional cards, and it has a really good little white book. Although it is brief. It's much more expansive. It's got keywords for upright and reversed, plus it has a blurb that often includes bits about the symbolism that's used in the cards. I really like this little white book. I highly recommend, I highly recommend this deck to anyone who is trying to learn tarot, who has an affinity for black and white decks. This one is an excellent one to learn on. There was another deck that was more colorful that I had in my rotation when I was learning as well. That one is no longer in my possession. I gave it away. I do plan on making a video about decks that have left my collection at some point, so I'm not going to talk about that one today. But this is the Bianco Nero. I got it while on a trip to the beach. My local beach town has a really cute little witchy shop. And I told my now husband, at the time fiance, I told him that I'm just warning you, when we go in there today, I'm going to buy a tarot deck. I'm going in there fully expecting to buy a tarot deck. And he said, this is the first time I'm going to hear that out of many more times. And he is very right. This deck is a very clear reader. It's a little bit dark at times. The Three of Cup cards I find to be very dark, and the Sun card I find to be a very dark interpretation of the cards. Let me see, have we already passed up both of those? Let's find out by going through the rest really quick, really quick, really quick. Here's the Three of Cups. Like, this is like a party you weren't invited to, right? Like, with the way they're looking at you disdainfully, it does not feel like these girls want me to be here. Oh, the Queen of Pentacles kind of looks feral. I love that. The Queen of Pentacles is one of my signifiers, so, like, I love that for me. I genuinely do. I think we may have already passed the Sun card. But nobody is happy in the Sun card in this deck. Everybody is frowning, including the Sun, I believe. So it's not particularly pleasant. So this deck, some of the happiest cards in the tarot are rather dark in this deck. So I like that about it. I think it gives it a weird little quirk. That's the Bianco Nero. And it's getting stuck. When I was early on in the process of making bags, I at first made my bags too big, and then I made them too small. I've been trying to course correct ever since, and I keep wobbling back and forth between too big and too small. Sometimes I think about buying bags because it would be easier, but then I think about how much money I spend on tarot already, and I decide that that's not a good idea. So I make them. It gives me a chance to practice stitching. Let's see. The next deck that I want to talk about is a mass market favorite, the Wild Unknown Tarot. This one was, I believe, the next deck I purchased in my collection. We've seen this a million times. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. These are the backs of the mass market edition. It shuffles really well. It's not too thick. Why does this happen? I even specifically went through this deck to put them all in the correct order. Or rather, right side up. Not in the correct order, but right side up. We don't need to belabor this point. I got this deck because it's a cult classic, and it was just different enough to challenge my concept of the tarot without pushing me too far. That's something about my tarot practice forever, is that I have always enjoyed, like, once I caught on to the basic symbolism of the core cards, I was like of the core Rider-Waite-Smith system, I was like, okay, let's move on to something else. Like, I got to that point fairly quickly. Not necessarily that I know as much as I should, but like with my attitude about it, that's where I got. That's one of my character flaws, you could say. I get bored very easily, so I have to push myself really fast. The next deck that I want to talk about is a weird one. This deck is my least favorite deck, my least used deck. The backs are all different, as you can see. That's because I have rebacked this deck. I chose to do that because I did not think that the original back designs matched the front. I have edged this deck in distressed ink. I have accidentally spilled water on this deck. I have used this deck once or twice, and I've gotten good readings with it. It's just that it has keywords, and the keywords aren't good. I don't like any of the keywords at all. I don't. They don't resonate with me. I mean, maybe one or two of them do, but by and large, I hate this deck because of the keywords. I think someday, maybe, I might chop it up. But then I would have the numbers and they'd get kind of cut up because they're not, I don't know. I don't think this deck and I will ever get along because of the keywords. This was a gift that somebody gave me. And I really appreciate it. It was a fun deck to modify, to reback and to edge, and I do like to pull it out and ignore the keywords every now and again. But it's a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, and most of the time, I would just reach for my next deck, which I realize I don't actually have with me, but it's in my purse in the living room. So we'll go back to that one later, but I have a copy of the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's my daily driver. I keep it in my purse. It's the playing card version. I'll show you all of it later after we get through the 10-minute segments that my videos record in. So the next deck that I want to show you is an independent deck. It was the first independent deck that I ever purchased. I first saw it on Elisa Pepez video. She briefly mentioned it. And I immediately knew that I had to have it as soon as I saw some of the cards. This is the Zeke's Arcana Tarot. This is an absolutely beautiful Lisa Frank pop art, neon, quasi-neon, I guess, deck full of teals, turquoise, gold, rich pinks, fuchsias, magentas, and purples. It's stunning. I love this deck so much that I bought it twice. The first copy of it that I owned, I riffle shuffled the hell out of it. I was very aggressive with the cards, and you'll notice the embossing on the back goes straight through the center quite a bit, and so they fold really easily if you're rough with them. And after just a couple of weeks with mine, they had been, or not weeks, but probably about a month and a half. So yeah, I guess you could say weeks if you really stretch what you're including in that, that vagueness. But yes, creased it, couldn't use it anymore, crushed. I mean, I could use it. I could use it well enough that I gave it away to my brother-in-law so that he can find joy in what I could no longer bring myself to use. But okay, so here's the reason I wanted to buy another copy. I riffle shuffle. I have to riffle shuffle. It's in my blood. I don't know. I have to riffle shuffle. And when it was creased, every time I would riffle shuffle it, the creasing would get worse. But now that I have a new copy of this deck, I can not riffle shuffle, but do what I like to call waterfall shuffling. And I get a bad shuffle, but I'm still able to, when I go to riffle shuffle, on autopilot, when I go to do it without thinking, I can catch myself and have it waterfall shuffle. Usually it breaks apart into smaller clumps than what it's doing right now. I always have a hard time shuffling on tables. I usually read tarot sitting on the ground with a tarot mat. But yeah, I love this deck. I love this deck so much. Happy to have bought it twice, just because it's an independent deck and it is going out of print. So if you like it, go out and get it as quickly as possible. It's on Tarot Stack and on the Zeke's Lunchbox website. The Zeke's Lunchbox website is going to be shut down soon. So if you can't find it, that means that the deck is no longer hosted there. Let's see. Next. Whoop. Next we have this deck, which is the Antique Anatomy Tarot. This bag is made of duochromatic velvet. It's beautiful. The Antique Anatomy Tarot is bones and anatomical drawings of musculature, and it's flowers that are completely made up. It's a pip deck. It's really good for spirit work, like spirit communication. I've used this to speak with past relatives. I love this deck. It's super popular. This, of course, is the mass market edition. I wish it shuffled better than it does. If I shuffle it face up, I can usually get a pretty okay shuffle out of it. But if I try to shuffle it face down, it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. So that's the Antique Anatomy Tarot. Love that one. It was my go-to deck for a while just because it was the only muted deck that wasn't black and white that I had. So I brought it with me basically everywhere that I went. Well, that's not true, because around this time I also got the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. No, we have a little bit more time before I go get that one. Let me instead show you the Hush Tarot, which was purchased on complete impulse. I had just watched a YouTube video that showed some of the cards from this deck. Here are the backs. And I was like, oh my gosh, that artwork is beautiful. Not really paying attention much to it, just thinking beautiful artwork. And then when I went to my local occult shop, I saw they had it for sale there. And I foolishly thought, oh my God, it's meant to be. I'm going to buy that deck. And then I got it in my possession, and I actually really struggle with this deck because while it does challenge my understanding of the tarot, which is something I really like a deck to do, it does not do so in a way that makes sense for me or aids in my ability to read other decks particularly well. Perhaps if I knew more about birds, I would find this deck easier to use. Because I do struggle with it, I find this deck to be really good for, like, basically I use this deck for my communications with the Divine Masculine, and that has the form of Apollo, the form of Cernunnos. It's Pan for me, so there's, I would use this deck absolutely for communicating with Dionysus, with energies like that. Like, this is my, like, Divine Masculine deck. I could also use the Bianco Nero for that sort of thing, but it's less expressive, and a little bit, I don't know, I like to push myself to use this deck, I guess, is ultimately what it comes down to. Even though I struggle with it, I love the artwork still. I still love Jeremy Hush's artwork, so I still try to use this deck as much as I can, even though it has a pretty niche job for me in my collection. Speaking of niche jobs, let's really quickly blow through the Phantasma Tarot. This was another, I saw it and I had to have it deck, except it wasn't this deck specifically. It was the Paulina Tarot I first saw, and I figured, okay, this artist has a deck named after them. I'm sure they have other art. So I went home and I looked up her name because it was super easy to remember, Paulina Faye. And then I found out Paulina Faye was also Paulina Cassidy, and she had made multiple decks. And so then I spent a lot of time looking at her multiple decks, trying to figure out which one was the one for me. And ultimately, I went with the Phantasma Tarot because it doesn't have borders, and that was something I wanted more of in my collection. Plus, the artwork was just very Fae energy without being too insect exclusive like the Spirit Song is. It wasn't... I liked the idea of having the bigger cards, quite frankly. It was something I could really get into. Like, these cards are images that you can sink into this. You can spend a lot of time looking at these cards and finding meaning from the little details, because they're very detailed, and I don't know how much each individual little detail does matter. My camera cut me off, so I went ahead and took the opportunity to go get the deck that I keep referring to, and I also realized I could change my lighting a little bit, so I did that, and I drank some tea, but now we're back. And what I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted was that this deck really just has... Actually, now that even though I prepped myself for this, I've already forgotten what I was saying before. I got so caught up in getting caught up. But this deck has strong Fae energy. I use it for communicating with nature spirits, for communicating with my familiar, who is the spirit of a past pet. I use this deck for communicating with, sometimes just like Gaia, Diana, like that kind of energy. So that's the Paulina, excuse me, not the Paulina Tarot, but that's the Phantasma Tarot. I love it. I also like that the cards are big. That was one of the things that drew me in. I don't know if I got caught off before I said that I liked that the cards were borderless. That's a big plus for me as well. Next, let us talk about... we'll talk about those two together, I guess. Let's talk about the Fountain Tarot. This one's sentimental because I bought this one to celebrate my getting married. Not my getting engaged, but my actual getting married. I can't tell you why. The reason is personal. But this deck in particular was very meaningful to me around the time of my wedding, and so I bought this close to then. My husband also really loves this deck. This is my favorite of his favorite of my decks. There we go. His favorite of my decks. It's beautiful. I don't know if this is acrylic, but it looks like watercolor or gouache. Gosh? I don't know. I'm not an art person. I paint, but I'm absolutely not an art person. I go hard on these cards. They're super, like, the deck is super bent, and a lot of the cards have little crease-like lines in them because I have shuffled this deck way too aggressively. I'm trying to fix that. That's one of my bad habits. We're working on it. But I don't like this card. I find her staring at me to be unsettling. I love this card. This is one of my favorite moon cards to ever moon. This is a great Five of Wands. This is a great Ace of Wands. This is a great King of Wands. Like, I just think this deck nails some of the concepts that it's presented with. Like the Hermit, fantastic. Eight of Coins, fabulous. The World, this one's kind of a miss. King of Coins, love it. Four of Swords, perfect. Like, Two of Cups, fantastic. I love this deck. I love this deck so much. I don't love that some of the people look kind of like celebrities, but there's only a couple of those as opposed to it being like the whole deck. If it's like the whole deck is modeled after celebrities, I can't do it. But this one just has a couple where I swear the drawings were modeled after famous people. But that's the Fountain Tarot. Next, I want to rapid fire talk about... Actually, before I get into these two different decks, let me mention or show you my playing card size version of the Rider-Waite-Smith that my husband bought for me. I do not keep a guidebook with this deck. It does not need one, and I find the original Rider-Waite-Smith guidebook to be a bad one. I don't think it's particularly helpful when trying to learn. I would rather read the full pictorial key to the tarot, and I still haven't managed to do that because it's so dry. So I found it to be not helpful after reading it about 5 times, and so I just took it out, and I don't carry it around in the bag anymore. I I don't really need to flip through this. We all know what the Rider-Waite-Smith looks like. This is just the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's a deck of playing cards. It's got a beautiful muted quality to it that's similar to the Centennial, but it's poker size, and I like that about it. I find it's very functional. I talk more about the functionality of it in my very first video I ever made, which was my everyday carry tag, or not my everyday carry tag, but the everyday carry tag, my response to it. And so that's that on that. Next, I want to talk about the Rosebud Tarot. This is a deck that I use for Divine Feminine communication, any kind of Divine Feminine power, or I use this to read for other people or myself. But usually if I'm reading for myself with it, it's Divine Feminine style reading. I'm trying to get in touch with Goddess, or I'm trying to balance out my gender confusion, which sometimes happens. I am gender fluid, so like I will sometimes reach for a masculine or a feminine leading deck when I'm trying to suss out how I feel about the day. So this is a beautiful collage style deck that is based on the Rider-Waite-Smith system. It's got poetry in the guidebook, and it's not necessarily a deck I would recommend for beginners, but it is a deck I would recommend for people who are already familiar with the Rider-Waite-Smith system and who are looking to try something fun and new and who don't mind photography of actual literal people in their deck. This deck has one of my favorite Page of Cup cards. I like that it changes so much in the names of the suits and of the major arcana. And by the way, I hate to be a Texan about this, but it is arcana because it's arcane. It's not arcana. It's arcon, like it's not arcana because it's not archon. It's arcane because it's arcana. So that's my spiel. That's my personal opinion, and it may be wrong. I don't know. It's an opinion though, so it's not a fact. It's an opinion. And so you can't criticize me. That's not true. People can have bad opinions all the time. Love this deck. Thoroughly recommend it if you are not a beginner. But also probably you're not going to want it if you've got like a whole bunch of decks and you're super familiar with the Rider-Waite-Smith system and you're like trying to get into Thoth or Marseille. It's a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. It's very Rider-Waite-Smith inspired. Speaking of, so is our next deck, the Intuitive Night Goddess. I love this deck. I use it for shadow work and for dark goddess work. It's not particularly aggressive on the shadow work front. This is like nice shadow work, as opposed to I would use the Bianco Nero for shadow work that's a little bit more aggressive, that's a little bit more in my face. This one I like to use when I'm doing the shadow work, but I want someone there to help guide me through it. Specifically, I use this deck for a lot of Hecate rituals, or Hecate, or Hecate, however you say her name. I think all of it is valid. That's the thing about gods. I think the pronunciation of their names are going to change with time because their names change with time. What they go by changes over time. Anyway, this is a deck that I really love. I don't love how it shuffles. It's a little bit sticky, it's a little bit clumpy, and it's another one of those decks that really wants me to shuffle it facing upwards instead of with the backs up. So that annoys me about it. But these goddesses are really fun. This is one of my favorite cards in the world. I love this death card so much. It's a beautiful deck. Highly recommend it if you like quasi-pip, quasi-Rider-Waite, female-heavy, black background, black border decks. I have edged mine. It does not come like that. I did that. I also edged the Phantasma Tarot as well. I'm eventually going to edge the Rosebud Tarot. I might do that on film. I'm thinking I might do that as anyway, I've got a plan for that. Next, I want to talk about the Modern Witch Tarot deck. If loving this deck makes me basic, then I am basic. I don't care. I think this is so cute. This is just a feel-good deck for me. It's huge. It's difficult to shuffle, but I love this deck so much. Oh, here we go. It's just a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, but it is so cute. It's very feminine, but I love it anyways. It has gender neutral appearing people in it not many, but some. It's inclusive, diverse, yada yada. I love the modernity of it. It's there without being overwhelming. It's not, like, it's still people-centric. It really is just a Rider-Waite-Smith clone with a modern flair, a modern feminine flair. I love this deck so much. I don't reach for it all the time, but when I'm in the mood for it, I'll use it for days at a time. I love to use it for readings on my Tumblr and for other people. Yeah, I love this deck. I just think it's so cute. I wish it were easier to shuffle, but I mean, like, I can still riffle shuffle it. I'm not going to show you because, like, I'm on camera and my thumbs hurt right now, but I can riffle shuffle it. Not well, but I can do it. I don't like the extra card that it came with. I'm not even going to open it back up to show you because it annoys me. I wish it had a little bit, I don't know, I wish it were different. The next deck that I'm going to show you is out of print. I paid out of print prices for it, and I only sort of regret having done so because I use this deck all the time. I love it so much. I've immediately bonded with it. I find it to be difficult but intuitive. I find it to be, like, it's a deck that's worth knowing even though it speaks a different language than me, quite literally. This is the Yonasa Yao 7th edition. I bought this from a seller on eBay for what I imagine is approximately twice what I would have paid for it had I bought it at original selling. This deck is based in the Marseille tradition very loosely. As you can see, it is not a Marseille deck. It's just that Yonasa Yao is a Marseille tarot reader, and as such, she creates Marseille-intended decks. Some of these have very Rider-Waite-Smith readable images. Some of them challenge me. Some of them are downright perplexing, but that's something that I really enjoy about this deck. I love the color scheme of this 7th edition. I'm happy I got this darker edition. I do sometimes use this for shadow work because it is these darker images, so it does really get me in touch with, like, the darker parts of myself. It's a very feminine deck. It's not super inclusive, but it's also, like, purple people, you know? Like, they're obviously white or white Hispanic, which is still white, I guess. I don't understand these distinctions. I have to admit, I don't fully understand them. I am quite ignorant. But it's not a lot of fat bodies. I don't think there's any fat bodies in this deck, but that's also not the point. It's not trying to be inclusive. It's beautiful without being despite the fact that it does not seem to be a highly sellable deck, despite the fact that there is no, it just seems like a very personal deck to me. It almost feels like looking into Yonasa Yao's mind. And I imagine the Stunning Tarot would feel similar, and I hear she's working on another deck, so I'm desperately hoping that that is one that I can get, if I like it, one that I can get at the time of release. Yeah, I like Yonasa Yao's work a lot. I'm going to continue to follow her. I'm glad that it's not in English. I mean, it's I don't even know if the language and culture that Yonasa Yao comes from is one that would even be considered white in American standards. So I'm sorry, I'm still thinking about that. I'm hung up on not knowing things. I hate not knowing things. Next, I want to talk about Tarot is Color. This was a gift from my husband. This was a birthday gift from my husband. This is a minimalist paint splotch abstract emotional color deck that has some really interesting titles on the cards. I don't know if those titles are original, like if they're meant to be the names, the alternative names of the paintings from when this deck was originally an exhibit, or if they are taken from like some magical tradition like the Golden Dawn. I don't know. I think that the cards are stunning. I think that this deck is really difficult to read with, but I love it anyways. I love sinking into a 2 or 3 card reading from this deck and just like finding meanings from the different cards, or the different colors from the different cards. That's what all tarot reading is. Finding meanings from the way the colors interplay with one another, as well as, you know, challenging my understanding of the tarot and pushing my boundaries beyond just Rider-Waite-Smith, because some of these titles don't match with the Rider-Waite-Smith system, which is why I say I don't know where they come from. The artist in the Not Quite guidebook that comes with the deck writes about how they have separated. It's also scented like perfume, and it comes with this art print in it. Smells like roses. This guidebook is very sparse, but yeah, it says it uses Crowley's 777 as the basic text, but I'm not entirely sure what that means. It writes a little bit about how the artist has chosen to represent the color and connections between the cards that the artist makes, such as connecting certain cards from the major arcana with the minor arcana. Perhaps that's a Decan thing. I don't know much about the Decan, but I know much about this deck, and it's great. I love it a lot. I love to do readings about like my highest self, and when I say highest self, I mean like my idealized self, like the person that ideally I would like to grow into being. Like I do work with that person, that energy with this deck. I also like to use this deck for meditation. So it's really good for both of those things. And then we have one more deck and we're done. So let me see if I can get through this one really quickly, because I've only got like 2 minutes left on the timer. This is the Tattoo Tarot Ink and Intuition. It is bowed. I'm pretty sure every single copy of this deck has a weird bow to it. I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but there is like a bit of a twist. This deck is a pip deck that is done in the style of traditional tattoo art. It's slightly reminiscent of Marseille Tarot, but it is definitely not a Marseille deck. It's primary colors, and it's beautiful. I love this one. This one's a newbie for me, but I cannot put it down. I've been using it so much for my personal readings and on my Tumblr. The Tattoo Tarot Ink and Intuition. I'm just going to keep flipping through cards until I run out of time. I've got 10 seconds. So that is actually my entire tarot collection. That's all of my oracle decks in the previous video, which I will link down below. And that's also all of my current decks. I do have one deck that is a tarot deck that I'm waiting to get in the mail, and one deck that is an oracle deck that I'm waiting to get in the mail. I should have those sometime this month. And I want to make a deck wish list video, so that will be coming up. And before I let you go today, I just wanted to show you some, so like I know in the last video I showed you my journal of tarot studies and card analyses. And I did not show you what is after the 78 cards in this deck. So I wanted to take a moment. For a little bit, I used this as a tarot journal to journal my daily draws. But then I got my actual tarot journal, so I switched over to that. And I didn't want to dispose of the ones I had done, so I just paper clipped and taped them all together with washi tape. I've got the deck in on this side, this left side, and then I launch into a bunch of spreads. So all of the spreads that were in my grimoire, I copied over here, and then I have added some new ones as I've invented them for readings. And I've left a lot of blank pages so that I can add spreads in the future. I think I can have a total of like 60 spreads in here, depending on how big they are. And here is my catalog of decks. You can see some spoilers on this page for decks that I've gotten rid of already. But this is the last thing that's in here. I've got some pages that I've set up for this purpose. But then I think I might, starting on this page, I might list some deck pairings that I like and start recording those. That might be a thing that I use these last couple of pages for, because realistically, I don't want a deck that's more than approximately maximum 50 decks, or I don't want a deck collection, deck library that's more than about 50 decks. That would be my absolute upper maximum. And right now I have around 20 decks, less than 20. I think I might have 15 or 16 decks. I do have one plastic Rider-Waite Smith deck, but I use that for altar because it doesn't catch fire. So that is also another deck that I have. I'm not going to show you because it's just the Rider-Waite Smith in a plastic form. It's on plastic cards. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'm going to let you go. I have kept you here for an embarrassing amount of time. Thank you for hanging out, looking at decks, listening to me babble. Thank you for being forced. This entire video, I've been forcing you to look at this collage that I made that honors several different goddesses. So, ha 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 ha, I made you look at this. Thank you. Peace out. I love you. Bye. Mwah.